So I haven't seen many videos talking about curries refurbished, and so I thought I'd do just that for my fellow UK people because I'm sure there are many of those wanting to buy from them and are curious about the condition. Now FYI, I'm talking about refurbished products you get off Currys from their eBay store, which falls under the name Currys Clearance. However, I am aware that Currys now sells refurbished products directly on their site as well. I'm assuming both the eBay store and the Currys site share the same stock, and so let's delve into my experience. The product I bought was an M2 iPad Air 11-inch, and what they said was Refurb B condition. This means there are signs of use on the product, but it should be completely functional. However, why I was curious about buying from Currys is because based on the feedback I've seen, it seems their Refurb B and sometimes even their Refurb C products are basically brand new. And so could I get a steal here, guys? Well, eBay dropped their Black Friday 20% codes, and so I made sure to buy the M2 iPad Air ASAP, and within 48 hours, the product was with me. Very quick delivery. Now, upon unboxing this, the box didn't seem too reassuring. Clearly, it had been opened, which I'm not surprised about because it is a refurbished product. They did not claim it was brand new, but the actual condition of the box was not the best. It clearly had seen better days, though that's a non-issue as long as the product inside is unaffected. So after cutting open the box, which by the way, they had sealed with some sellotape, inside was a pretty basic pamphlet and then the iPad itself, and also inside all the accessories were intact. Well, I should clarify that because it's a UK model, we only get one accessory in the box, but that was not missing, which I was very glad to see. Anyway, I powered on the iPad, looked at the chassis of the device, which on face value was in pretty good condition, but of course, I gave it a wipe down, and after inspecting it, yeah, this is basically brand new. There is one little mark next to the power button, but I'll gladly live with that if I get to save over £200, which I did, since this was around £370 and the iPad currently retails for £599. That's a massive discount, guys, and as I said, the condition of this is fantastic. You know what else would be fantastic? Subscribing to this channel, of course. It's free and would bring you the latest about Apple right to subscription box, so please consider it. It would be appreciated. Join the Saranbyte gang now. Anyway, the next thing I was curious about was the battery cycle and whether this still had Apple warranty, and one of the reasons I got the new iPad Air is because you can now natively check the battery off on these new iPads. And so if you go into settings, you can see this only has 10 battery cycles. And so I'm assuming this is a customer return Currys got that they're reselling as a refurbished device. 10 cycles is really nothing, that's essentially brand new, and I also have Apple warranty till September 2025, so this was only activated a few months ago, which again does seem to suggest it was a customer return, and so overall I'm pretty happy with this purchase. If anything, this purchase makes me wonder what the differences are between Refurb A, B and C, but it's safe to say, guys, that based on the feedback and my own experience now, Currys Refurbished is a great way to save money on new purchases. And I know that sounds like a sponsored bit, but I'm not being sponsored to say this. I bought this iPad with my own money, and yeah, I'm very glad that it's basically brand new. And as I said, the only cosmetic damage I've seen is a tiny scratch near the power button, but I can easily live with that for the savings. And by the way, if you've bought from Currys Refurbished, let me know in the comments what has been your experience. Has it been positive like mine, or has yours been negative? I'm assuming based on the feedback I've seen on eBay, most are getting near brand new devices. And so yes, for my UK people, definitely consider this for your next Apple purchase. Anyway, if you're wondering about my general thoughts on the iPad Air 6, I did actually review this back at launch, and I wasn't so positive about this iPad, and so let's delve into my old review. So I made a video regarding why I wouldn't recommend buying the M2 iPad Air shortly after Apple's event, and I got some comments saying I shouldn't judge a product before I have it in my hands, which is fair. So guess what, guys? I now have the M2 iPad Air, and my thoughts haven't changed. Let's delve into my review. So what's my problem with this iPad? Is it a horrible, unusable product? Not really, it's still a pretty decent tablet, but my original point stands in that this does nothing special compared to the older M1 iPad Air that's of course now available for much less. Take for example the design. You really can't tell this apart from the iPad Air 5 if you got it in space grey like I did, and what's funny is that the Air 5 in the first place looks identical to the Air 4, which looks identical to the 2018 iPad Pro. Wow, they've been reusing the same design for 6 years. but I can't blame them for doing that because it's a practical design that works. The flat edges are very easy to grip onto and of course helps accommodate the Apple Pencil, and it would be nice if the bezels were thinner, but they do serve a purpose. You can still place your finger somewhere when using the iPads. The display also similarly has no upgrades over the Air 5 and Air 4, but it does the job for the most part. It's 10.9 inches, LCD, it has a resolution of 2360 by 1640 with 500 nits of brightness. It's also laminated with P3 support, True Tone, and has an anti-reflective coating. Those are not special specs, but of course, it is perfectly fine for watching movies and YouTube on, and of course, I know some techies who need that buttery smooth 120Hz refresh rate are gonna be bothered by the lack of it on the Air, but I'll be honest guys, iPadOS is fluid enough where I just don't notice the lack of 120Hz. Brightness is also completely fine for indoor usage, and the Apple Pencil experience is unaffected by the lack of 120Hz. It's a laminated display, so it's much better to jot things down on this compared to the base iPads. You know what else would be better, guys? For me, if you subscribe to the channel, of course. What a horrible segue, but anyways, I would greatly appreciate it. It would bring you the latest about Apple right to subscription box, so please consider it. It would be appreciated. Anyways, let's now move on to accessories. This does support the old Magic Keyboard, and I think it's a must-have for anyone wanting their iPad to be a laptop replacement. Now I know some may be put off by the retail price, but because it's been around for a few years now, you can find this for much less from third parties. I've seen it for as low as $150 sometimes, and of course it's going to be even less on the refurbished and used market, and that is an incredible price for how good this keyboard is. Now it is with the base iPad, and the Pro iPads get keyboards with a function row, and this doesn't, but I still prefer the floating design the iPad Air's Magic Keyboard has, compared to the Magic Keyboard Folio on the iPad 10. However, let me remind you guys, the iPad Air 5 also supports the same keyboards. Pencil-wise, I still find it very annoying the M2 models don't support the older Gen 2 pencil. Now yes, I understand that Apple moving the camera to the landscape position might have broken support, but for those with older iPads considering the upgrade, it is very irritating. You have to get both an iPad and a new $129 Pro pencil with it, even if your Gen 2 pencil works completely fine. Yes, the USB-C pencil is cheaper and you could get that instead, but remember that's a downgrade over the second gen, so that's a negative for the Air 6 regardless. But of course, if you're new to the iPad world, this is not a problem, and so I would highly recommend getting an Apple Pencil because not only is it useful for art and note-taking, but also video editors might appreciate using this for more precise edits, and Apple has shown how Final Cut has been optimized on the iPad to better work with the pencil. Performance-wise, the M2 iPad Air has the M2 chipset with 8 gigs of RAM, and I was surprised by this because M2 is nearly 2 years old, and so with the iPad Pro getting the M4, that could have paved the way for the Air to get the M3, but surprisingly they've stuck with the older M2. Now this is still a very good chipset. It gives you access to Pro apps, and Final Cut runs flawlessly for my edits, and so it should be fine for most creatives wanting to use more Pro apps on this. But I will mention though that the older M1 iPad Air also handles these apps just as fine, and if you're a student or a regular consumer considering this, you're just better off saving your cash and getting another older iPad, even those without an M series chipset, because the M1 and M2 really only make sense for creatives, and if you don't take advantage of the power, these are going to be very similar to older iPads in terms of regular usage. Anyways, because there's so much headroom here, you should be sorted when it comes to software support. Of course, I don't know for sure how long the iPad Air 6 will be supported, but considering how good M2 still is, I could see this getting 6 to 7 years of updates, and since this is an M series chipset, it's likely this iPad will continue getting all iPadOS features for a while, since remember right now, non-M series iPads do miss out on a few things. However, once again, let me mention the M1 iPad Air also is going to be supported for a while. Yes, it might lose support before the M2, but still, I expect that to get another 4 or 5 years of updates at the very least. Now let's move on to battery life with the Air 6, and it's been solid. However, I will say it's worse in my experience compared to other iPads, specifically the regular models. This was the case with the M1 as well. Maybe these M series chipsets are using more power, but for most people's needs, these iPads should be fine endurance-wise. Now, another plus with the iPad Air is the USB-C ports. Whilst this doesn't offer Thunderbolt speeds, it is much faster than the iPad 10 with its USB 2 speeds, and this transfers data up to 10 gigabits per second, so transfer speeds should be completely fine, and it does support displays up to 6K resolution, though again, say it with me guys, the M1 iPad Air also does this. Quickly touching on the cameras, Apple does recommend you to add footage you record on the iPad to your Final Cut timeline, but please do not do this. Whilst it's not the worst rear camera in the world, it should really be only used for scanning documents. The front-facing camera, however, is fantastic for video calls since it does have center stage, so it does follow you around the room if you move, and it's now in a better position. That's actually the first genuine upgrade with the Air 6. That does make a difference. Speakers and mics wise, much like the Air 5, the Air 6 is also very solid. It's not quad speakers like the iPad Pro, but it surprisingly gets close with 2 less speakers, and it's a stereo pair. They're great for watching movies with, and the mics are great for calls. Touch ID is actually something I do prefer here compared to Face ID on the iPad Pro, because I often manage to block the Face ID module when using the Pro models, and so I find it much easier to just press the home button and boom, the iPad instantly unlocks. It's super reliable. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity have been upgraded with the Air 6, but like most Apple products, it's been solid, no big improvements, it just does the job in this aspect. Now, I do want to mention, yes, I'm aware the Air 6 has one crucial upgrade, which is double the base storage. It starts at 128 gigs now and also maxes out at 1 terabyte if you have overkill storage needs. But as a rebuttal point, I would say that if it needs a basic 64 gigs on the older Air is just about enough for most. Thankfully, external SSDs are pretty cheap, so if you're willing to carry them around for your creative workflow, you can make do with the older 64 gig M1 model. And so overall guys, after using the M2 Air, my initial opinion wasn't wrong guys. This is just a typical spec refresh, and so I'm still going to point people towards the M1 iPad Air instead because it offers 98% of the same experience for much less. It's often on sale for $399. The same applies in the UK, I've seen it for around £400, and I'm sure it's going to continue dropping in price as retailers clear existing stock. And ultimately, if your needs are not basic and you're creative looking to push your iPad by editing on this, or doing more complex layered artwork, the M1 can still handle that perfectly fine. The only way I recommend the M2 is once it gets discounted, but even then the Air 5 is going to continue getting cheaper on the used and refurbished market. And remember, if your needs are very basic like note-taking or watching videos, there's also the very excellent iPad Air 4 which shares very similar specs to the iPad 10 but with a laminated panel and Pencil 2 support. The older iPads just offer infinitely more value for your money than the M2 Air. It's simple as that guys. The M2 iPad Air is not a bad product, but it doesn't do enough to justify the extra cost for it. And the same applies for those upgrading from much older iPads. You're better off just going for an Air 5 instead. There's really only some edge cases where I could see somebody justifying the Air 6. For example, you like the new colors, or you want that landscape camera really bad. But apart from that guys, get an older iPad instead. Now FYI guys, I only got to review the smaller $599 model, but the bigger size is very similar for the most part. It has a slightly brighter panel, but that's about it. And if you're looking to buy that new 13-inch chair, I would point you towards the M1 iPad Pro, because that's also available for around the same price and has mini LED and quad speakers. Those would make a big difference even if it has an older chipset. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.